please let me know if you can see the shared screen? Will be helpful. Okay. So
Got it.
welcome to Tribe Talk. Tribe. See, I can't even speak now. I'm all flustered. Welcome to Tribe Talk. Tribe Talk is just a group of people who have more in common than difference. They get together to talk about motorcycle rider education. Uh, the whole intent is to enhance communications, get people talking to each other and sharing ideas and experiences for the betterment of the tribe. I always have to put this little caveat in there that this really isn't sponsored by any organization, regardless of who may show up. We've had some really great people jump in and out, and I'd like to thank everybody who does come. The sole purpose is just the improvement of the tribe, and in this case, the tribe is rider education. A little tribe talk etiquette up front. If you're not talking, it's good to mute your microphone so that any ambient noises where you are doesn't interrupt the conversation. We're pretty good about jumping into conversations, but if it gets heated or there's a lot of things going on, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll get to you as soon as I can. If I don't get you right away, chat me up, and we'll get you into the chat, out of the chat and into the window as quickly as possible. You can ask questions and self-communicate in the chat box anytime you please. Feel free to talk to other people in the group, or if you'd like to share some, like you have seen people do already, please feel free to do so. As we talk about things tonight, I'll always reiterate the fact that your context may not be the same context as somebody else's. So all these different jurisdictions may look at it in different ways or have different rules or policies. So please keep that in mind and know that we're looking for the best answer for most. Lurkers are welcome. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. And if there are any technical difficulties, I have a few co-hosts. Sometimes I drop off, other people drop off. Please come back in as quickly as possible if there are those technical difficulties, and we'll get back into it as quickly as we can. So I see our guest has arrived. Everybody, welcome home, please. In control.
Okay, share screen.
And then you select the screen you want to share.
Okay. There. Can everybody see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So I'll just get going here since we have a lot to cover. Thank you for offering me this opportunity, Don, to reach out to your members so we can do this job together, which is to keep the rider safe. So I'll jump right in here. The Snell Memorial Foundation, I want to run a quick history. Started in 1957, a year after Pete William Snell died of head injury in an auto racing accident in California. He was the racer of the year in the Sports Car Club of America, and very young, very popular. People donated money to memorialize him, and the money later was the seed money to start the Snell Memorial Foundation so that the racers can better be protected, because the helmet that he was using in this tragic accident utterly failed to protect him. This you can see. The brown section is cardboard paper bounded with white leather for fashion. And this suspension system inside only provided ventilation and comfort. And this is brown color is really the blood from the impact to his head resulted in fatal injury. So the foundation's mission is to set performance standard for helmets so that these racers are better protected. So I reviewed your website previous tribe talk and realized you folks were talking about how to choose the rider coaches and touched upon standards. How, what is important in selecting the right coach. And that is a lot more complicated and hard to do than what we do here. I have to share that with you because we have been doing this on a very simple matter, that is science and medical facts, and pointing out which helmet did a better job protecting our dummy so that the criteria can be set at a lower threshold so that the brain is better protected. So I wish you all luck on your job there, finding the right coach to lead your program. And I will just quickly go over how Snell does his job in selecting the helmet that would meet our recommendation list, which is the Snell certification to the general public. Basically, it's hard for consumers to gauge which helmet protect them better. If it's the same style or color, it's easy to see. But once they got all these style and color variation, people easily get distracted and forgot what the job is for the helmet to do, which is protecting the head. And here is a collection of all the previous Snell standards, which you can see every 5 years gets replaced. Very little change on the cover, but the content of this documentation, which spells out how these helmets should be tested, what the scientific background is for setting the test instrumentation and justification validity, and what the criteria are. So anybody who really would take on testing helmets would know exactly what we use to examine the performance criteria that we set out. So basically the standards are just documentations, paper, but the effectiveness, how these helmet standards actually work, depends on a lot more testing based examination. And that is what we have here, a very strict and independent certification process, which put helmets, a series of helmets, identical helmets, through a very rigorous certification process, which is what I'm going to explain later. And then once they pass, how do we enforce the compliance of these helmets that initially meet the certification test? And so that the consumers get what we consider was the best head protection. Of course, all these needs a lot of experience and competence. And this is what I'm going to show you. How we did before in the oldest Snell testing lab. As you can see, these are very primitive at the time. This is late 50s, early 60s photo of the Snell lab. This is George Snively, the founder. And that's Dr. George Snively and Dr. Chichester. And as you see, the basic science is pretty simple. There's a sensor inside the dummy, and you drop the helmet after you raise it to a height using the constant gravitational force to induce a crash. And these cameras and sensors, the sensor produces a trace of the impact energy sensed by the dummy, and the camera takes a picture of it to show the testing results. So this is the very first kind of camera to take a record of the old Snell testing results. This is the current Snell lab. These helmets are put on dummies of different sizes. For instance, say this is a medium-sized helmet, then the manufacturer have to send at least 5 to 6 identical helmets to the lab, and they all get marked up like this, and anywhere on above this line becomes fair game for impact test. I mean the center of impact. So anywhere on here can be targeted and for impact. For instance, right here, this hemispherical anvil where the helmet coming down from this fall guided by the wires would impact right on the forehead area, right above this line that I just showed you. Okay, the footprint, that damage to this helmet will go well beyond the edge of the physical helmet because the shell will distribute that blow to a much larger area. And that's just for impact. There are other aspects of the standard look at, like peripheral vision. If it has a face shield like this one, will get a shot in the face shield to prevent penetration by pebble stones. Basically, this black card in here that cuts through that V-gate, we call it checks the velocity, like how fast the helmet is coming down crashing. And there's a dummy inside that measures how much energy that dummy head is sensing upon this impact. So we know how much impact energy we put into this helmet, and we know how much the dummy sensed. And that way we know how hard we beat it up and how much the helmet dummy sustained the impact. There, anywhere above that criteria is a failure. This is a penetration test. This spike is coming down from I think it's at least 10 feet high ceiling and coming down strikes this helmet anywhere on and above that line that we just saw before, and it cannot penetrate. That just requires the helmet has to have a very rigid shell. So during the crash, when the head strikes anything sharp, it should not penetrate and cause any skull fracture. This is a test to see if the buckle system, the anchor where the buckle is put a mount to the helmet is in the right location, so that when there's an angular impact, the helmet, if it's correctly buckled, it should not come off. So all these tests are just various ways. I want to show you the tests are done to make sure the helmet does its job as it designs to do. For instance, this is a failed face shield test. When the pellet of the air BB gun is shot at like about 500 feet per second velocity. So that's a failed helmet there for that test. So when the helmet fails, there's a documentation in the computer. So we document it, and when it's passed, and it has to pass every single aspect. If there's a single failure, then the whole set is done, because we have received 5 or 6 samples identical to each size. So the helmet gets onto the right dummy, and this is the sensor inside. So this housing facilitates this dummy that can rotate, so we can test anywhere on above this test line. And here you see some of the bad helmets did not protect our dummy very well. You look at all these dings and the cuts on there, that's when the helmet did not do a good job at all. Sometimes it won't make a ding, but the impact G-force level would go above our threshold of criteria, and that's a failure as well. So these are all the equipment that we have of different size dummies, a different sensor that put inside the dummy housed in these arms, and so helmet impact test can be done accurately. And you see there's an out of service tag on these, because these equipment had to be examined very closely so that the test data is valid. Sometimes if there's a hairline fracture on these, because they sustain so many hundreds of impact, that would send the data into a category that tells us, oh, something is wrong. This data is not repeatable anymore. It's going outside our standard calibration. So they have to be dumped. So basically, I show you all these pictures, not enough to really tell you how to test helmets, but that testing helmet is a very serious science-based test procedure that scrutinize the helmets in every way that the standard called out for a close look, and they should not have any problem. If we scrutinize it so closely, looking for the vulnerability, and they still pass, then it means this helmet is really designed to do its job better than most of the helmets out there that do not have Snell certification label. So basically, the certification only makes sure that the manufacturer has good intention and has capability to really design and make these helmets that would meet the standard. But it doesn't make sure or guarantees that when they start to make it, you riders out there are going to benefit from all these R&D job that they have done and demonstrated to us. So what we have to do is do random sample tests on the helmet that they produce later throughout the year on all these helmets sold to consumers. And that's when we buy these gorgeous looking helmet that's on the shelf in any store randomly based on their production, because every label that goes into the certified helmets is unique, has its own number. So we know exactly not only how many they are making, but also which stickers are using for each manufacturer. So basically, we don't make helmets, but we make sure that helmet that has a Snell label inside really meet the Snell certification standard. And throughout the production, it maintains this production quality that would guarantee the level of protection that we recommend to the consumers. And the sticker has barcode now. It used to show all the numbers. So why do we update the standard every 5 years? Because this label, before last October, it's an M 2015. And that was issued since 1915. And all the helmets made since then meets that standard. And now it's updated to 2020, starting last October. And basically, a lot of racing organizations recognize the excellency and the premium level of protection Snell standards offer. So they check this label inside the helmet to allow participants in their sanctioned events. So they make sure their racers get the highest level of protection there is there. So while the racing organization allows the most current and the immediate previous standard, for instance, like right now, since October last year, all the helmets in the racing tracks would be like 2020 or 2015. And I would emphasize that for most part, you know, for ordinary racers, ordinary riders and racers in these events, racing circuits, they get exactly the same level of protection. Snell does not distinguish which group would need more protection, because we consider ordinary riders in normal traffic actually are exposed to larger bigger danger of impact than the racers, because the racers are racing in a very safe environment. Actually, they are cushioned in a special racing course that's designed, and they are all focused, experienced, and they're all going in the same direction. See, all these are not the conditions that we have on the streets in public transportation situation. So there is really more need for head protection for ordinary riders in this sense. And because the standards are updated every 5 years, the standard criteria gets increased based on our best understanding what the manufacturers are capable of making right now. And we always try to push the bar higher. So these are statistics from the National Highway Safety Administration's report. The helmet, even though during these years, like from 1982 to 1980 through the 1993 to 2002, where this statistics are assembled, the DOT standard remained the same as far as its capacity to protect against a brain injury. But during these different times, the data showed the helmets actually became more and more protective. And we have a feeling and guess that this reflect over the years that the Snell standard had getting tougher over those times. And wait a minute. Sorry, I jumped. And the tougher the standard, the better the brain is protected. That's why we keep updating the standard. And DOT standard was issued in 1974. And even at that time was lower than the Snell standard at that time. It was supposed to be the minimum standard. And it's a national law, basically. Any helmet sold in the United States must meet this DOT standard, whereas Snell is totally a voluntary nonprofit premium standard. So I want to show you a slide to show you that what happens inside the helmet structure and the material of the helmet destructed, crushed during those impacts. Actually, this is a pretty massive impact in the front. The foam liner completely collapsed. This is not a memory foam like those soft, bungee, sponge-like foam in football helmets, for instance. When it crashed, once it's done its job, it never comes back to protect anybody a second time. So even a small bump can really make a ding and damage the shell and the liner. So this is why no helmet should be trusted if it's impacted even once. Even a mild crash could reduce the helmet protective capability greatly and really make the helmet vulnerable to sustain another impact. What happened is when you have a big impact like this, right here, the shell, the hard shell, distributes that blow to a larger area. So it brings all the foam in here into play to be crushed by that energy. And from our high school physics class, we all know energy constant. So when you have an energy momentum change, it has to go somewhere. So by destroying these helmet materials, that, let's say this is a dummy, this dummy does not feel the same level of G-force because the energy went to do the work to destruct the material in between the impact object and the impact material. So I want to show quickly this little 2 slides, which are published research that it's been since I think almost 10 years ago now. Some of you may not get the message, but the there were talks about how Snell helmets versus DOT helmet has pro and con. A lot of people were told that if you're an ordinary rider, you don't crash very hard. DOT helmet, DOT only helmet, because it's testing to a lower standard, it doesn't have to be hard foam. So a softer DOT helmet will cushion the head better in a softer crash. And we had to deal with that for many years. And we finally did a research to see what happens to Snell versus DOT helmet when you subject these helmets to both hard, like real severe crash, or to a more gentle crash. So we tested on two surfaces. This is the flat surface. We call it flat anvil. And the impact test started from 3 meters per second. On the x-axis, these are how hard the helmets are hit, like how hard you crash. So this is 3 meters per second, 4, 5, 6. Okay, as we increase the impact severity, we can see on the flat surface, there were not that many G difference. This is a peak G level, like the shock, the G force that the dummy was sensing, okay? As the impact gets more severe level to the Snell level, you can see the split start to be pretty clear. But at a lower level, on a flat impact, DOT and Snell helmets did not have very distinct difference in keeping the G-force lower. And this is the story you have been told by many people when they chose to tell you the story about Snell versus DOT impact. But let's see what happens here. And this is on a hemispherical anvil, which is giving a more concentrated load to a much smaller area when the impact happens. So look at this. This is impacted by a hemispherical anvil. So when you hit it hard enough, the difference is huge. And when you exceed the Snell level, the Snell helmets still performs very nicely, keeping the G-force at a very survivable and low G-force level, where the DOT only helmets skyrocket to fatal levels of G-force. So, and I want to remind you, these helmets not only were tested on flat and hemispherical anvil to show the big differences, that how Snell helmets protect very well, just like DOT on those less severe crashes. But when the crash level becomes higher, especially on a not flat surface, the difference is very significant. And this is a ambient, that's a room temperature treated helmet. You may not know, but when helmets are tested by Snell and the initial certification, every helmet that's submitted go to a hot, a cold, and a room temperature and a wet condition. So you need those 4 helmets identical, put into different environmental chambers, and then subjected to severe test on different anvils. So if this helmet happened to be treated in a hot chamber, this red line will be even worse because the foam is essentially plastic. It gets softened considerably in a hot environment and will crash, will not do as well as in a room temperature treated helmet sample. So the fact is, DOT helmet certification is not everybody all needs. Ordinary riders need just as much as racers on the racing events. And Snell certification protect much better at a higher level, no matter it's a gentle crash or a severe crash. And this has been shown by these scientifically researched project and published by peer review conferences. So this information is published in the international conference in France, Milan, where dozens of scientists of different fields were there. And that's the International Conference of Biomechanics Research. If anybody is interested in the details of that research, the documentation is posted on Snell website. So basically, there are three standards now in the marketplace. One is the old Snell and DOT. And sorry, I didn't update this slide. It still has the M25 on there. The other confusing thing is now in the marketplace is the ECE standard that you will see a lot more often. A lot of people, especially salespeople, are using this European Common Market standard to sell more DOT-only helmet. They tell people, oh, European standard, this helmet not only meets DOT, it also meets ECE standard. So therefore, it is a better standard. It's safer than those DOT-only helmet, because they don't want to talk about Snell and how it compares. So I want to show you this clear chart that DOT standard in terms of impact protection, it's worse than DOT. These are by the smaller sizes, is by 10%. In the larger sizes, it's less protective by 20%. So don't let those ECE labels just to make you have an impression that somehow you're having a better protection offered to you through a European standard. It is not true. The standard itself is less, and everybody builds to the standard. And here is why. Because for many years, helmet manufacturers, no matter what they do, either they tell you it's Kevlar or carbon shell or fiberglass or plastic shell or this and that technology or material, a different foam, no matter what they use, the criteria are the same. That is how these helmets manage the impact. So if the standard is set to manage less impact, there's no incentive for manufacturers to build more protection into these helmets, because other manufacturers try to really just build to the minimum and make the helmet look smaller and looks and weigh less. They market by lightest helmet, and the challenge is not really the whether the helmet is more protective, but who can build the lightest helmet that still offers the same level of protection. So the only way they can really do that is to reduce the helmet material. And if somebody can truly meet the standard with less material on somebody's head and make it more comfortable, they are the good winners. Okay, so they don't want to talk about other standards and whether these helmets are actually tested to the same level of crash and judged by the same criteria. So I want to just reiterate again, motorcycle helmet works. It does reduce unnecessary injury and prevent unnecessary fatalities. But our job is really educate people and understand how well these helmets work. And hopefully everybody makes up their own mind and choose the most protective helmets that fit them and use it all the time. We have no official position on legalizing helmet, make helmet mandatory, because like we are in California, there is a mandatory helmet law here, but we still have probably around at least 15% of the riders using those bogus German soldier hat type of helmet to just get away from getting a ticket. But these helmets are just utterly useless in terms of injury prevention. So we believe in the education with the right information, and hopefully people are going to use the information, make an educated decision, and change their behavior gradually and influence the people around them in their own community, in their own riding community. So basically, how am I doing with time?
Take all the time you need, dear. You're doing wonderful.
Okay. I want to quickly go over how helmets are designed to protect and why those German soldier hats are useless. Basically, helmets are built with 2 layers, at least, to really manage the impact from space and concept time. I'll go back to this slide to explain it better. So imagine this rider with a helmet on is riding at, say, 35, 40 mile an hour. So basically the whole body, including this head, has this momentum, this velocity of going horizontally on the street, you know, compare with the street travel cruising speed. And so if for some reason somebody cut in front of them, they get airborne and they crash down, or half, not straight down like, you know, landing on the tarmac, but, you know, at a certain angle. Basically, this is going to hit at some point when the helmeted head hit anything hard, the outside of the helmet, this shell, comes to a full stop immediately upon the contact. But the head, along with the body, continues to move in the direction that this impact happens. So what happened is the head inside is really squeezing this foam between the impact hard object, say it hit the curb, okay? The head is actually, the skull is harder than this foam, and the curb is harder than the helmet, right? So those 2 hard places, these materials in between start to crush up because there's energy transfer there. So basically the head is really crushing this liner while moving forward until it doesn't move anymore. That is when the head kind of squeezes the liner into from here to here. So once it crashed to the minimal, when the crash completed, that took about 5 to 7 milliseconds. And 1 millisecond is 1,000th of 1 second, but that is still 6-7 millisecond. And that is the deceleration time for the brain inside the skull to come to a little bit gentler stop. Then it didn't have this crush liner in here. So why is the hard shell important? Well, think about you work a thumbtack on the wall and how your thumb, while pushing the thumbtack into the wall, does not feel the pain as the nail, the pinpoint, because in a smaller area, concentrating all the force your thumb put on the thumbtack, the wall and the needle like pin is getting all the pressure and all the force. So that's how ancient people are smart enough to really design needles and nail to do the penetration job easier, because in a smaller area, it concentrate all the forces. So if the shell is very hard, it just works like the thumbtack to protect your thumb. It spreads the same force that's piercing the wall to a larger area on your thumb, so your thumb doesn't get hurt. And while spreading the load of this blow to a larger area from a dime size or quarter size, now it's a size of a tangerine. A grapefruit. So all that area is crushed. So the harder the shell, the larger the area, it will spread the blow, and then more of this foam come into play to be crushed by the head. So there's a lot of material at work here. Then if you don't have this liner, like wearing a German soldier hat type of helmet, or you have a very thin and soft liner that doesn't take much to be crushed like a feather pillow. So you want this foam to be like a Goldilocks situation that continuously being busted by the head and squeezed by the head and the curve while taking up all the energy that's generated by this momentum change. So this destruction takes time, and these helmets create space to crush up more material. And that's how the helmet saves a human brain. So this test that I showed earlier are all linear, like a straight head-on impact. It's very much like, say, a worst situation, somebody riding a motorcycle gets ejected and the head impact, say, a wall or a bridge post, and that would be a direct impact. But in a real crash of an accident, people ejected from the bike, they come down to the ground, they get hit on the arm or limb or shoulder before the head strikes the hard surface. That's usually the case. And this is when the helmet works the most effectively. But that's still like a direct impact that we are using in our test. So in the current R&D section in our lab, we are developing wireless dummies that can rotate and hitting different shapes so that the head is not going to get a direct impact and just go straight, have a one directional impact. So when this is all worked out, we will add more rotational tests to the current standard. And I don't see that happen very soon. As soon as we work it out, it will be in the future updates. So basically, these angular impacts are considered for future standard, but in the marketplace, you might get people trying to sell you, this helmet is designed to manage angular acceleration or a impact that's typical in situations that we don't currently test these helmets. Because, so you beware, I'm going to show a pretty gory picture here. Because instead of straight impact that's gravitation centered, the tissues can be twisted inside, and you stretch the blood vessels inside the brain a lot, it will break and cause bleeding inside the brain. So all of this is very, very bad news. But with the helmet does what it's supposed to do, to use the foam and the shell to work like a thumbtack, spread the impact area to a larger surface. So the head is not like the wall be penetrated, and apply more of the blow through the hard shell to use more of the liner underneath to crush more, to give the brain more time to decelerate, so that it brings the brain into a sudden stop that's not so sudden, so it doesn't get jolted too much. It's not how hard you crash. It's really how suddenly the brain comes to a full stop that really is harmful. So we got a typical like a skull fracture picture here. So basically, we at Snell, we don't make any helmets. Some people are very ignorant. They thought Snell is a manufacturer, and you see Snell name on the helmet. We are actually making the helmets. We don't. We are a nonprofit organization that operate our own laboratory to test and certify these helmets to our own voluntary standard. Nobody has to have Snell standard. It's just a choice. The manufacturers don't have to have it. Only the dedicated manufacturer who really want to provide this higher level of protection choose to make their helmets to our standard and send those helmets for us to test. And for DOT, you don't have to send to anybody to test because there isn't a DOT lab. When you see a DOT label on the helmet, it just means that manufacturer has done its diligent work and believe their helmet meet the DOT's criteria. They don't even have to send their own test report if they have one to file with the DOT. They just basically put the DOT label on the helmet, and that is their promise to you. It's an honor system. The DOT does have a market random sample test for 40 helmets out there every year, and that's what their budget allow. They contracted out for a commercial lab to test and try to see if anybody is failing to meet the standard. And we don't know how many manufacturers are making how many DOT only helmets out there, because we don't work like the Consumer Report to just randomly test helmets and publish magazines. No, we work as a Snell standard organization. We certify helmets. So the operation here is really sustained by the helmet manufacturer that sent their helmets here for testing. We charge everybody the same testing fee, treat everybody the same to the same standard. We look for the vulnerability in every helmet as we test them, and only recommend those helmets that meet every single criteria to the general public, and publish their name and size on our website. And they also require to put the sticker inside the helmet so that the consumers can identify them when they shop around. So basically, our task and our mission is really test for public safety. We update our helmet list on our website every day as new helmets certify, and you may check to see if any other helmets over the years are decertified, because they are, because we test randomly how these helmets sold to the public perform to the same standard. If they no longer meet the standard when we randomly test them, we make public announcement on our website. They are decertified, and the manufacturers are told stop production, stop distribution, because every helmet that has our label inside should meet our standard. And we test by size and the helmet model. We don't certify companies. We don't certify a brand. Every helmet has in that size has to get on the same size dummy to be tested in hot, cold, room temperature, and wet condition. And every motorcycle helmet gets tested at 4 locations twice. So that's 8 impact on each sample times 4, and you figure out how many impact tests alone each helmet size needs to be scrutinized. And on top of that, there are other tests as well. So you out there doing your job, teaching them how to write safely is very important. We are just only part of this whole effort to keep the riders safe. And we recommend these helmets to everybody because they provide much, much more protection than just the DOT minimum. I want to show you this one more time. In the largest size, Snell certified DOT helmets protect 40% more than the DOT standard. In the smallest size, the difference is 80% difference. So that is the difference when you see a Snell labeled helmet and a DOT only helmet. Nobody will meet the Snell standard because they don't have anything to show for it. Some people will say, oh, we built the helmet, it's just as good as Snell. They won't meet our standard. Don't believe any of it, because if they do, they would punish themselves by building a lot more capacity that they cannot really benefit from, doing all the R&D work and the quality control work. Snell is recognized by all the highest level of competition bodies, and recognized by a lot of grassroots sports communities. And this is a Hall of Fame 2015 by the Sports Car Club of America to Snell. And as you know, they are the founding support for this organization as well. And all the Grand Prix races, the NASCAR, IndyCar, they all require head protection, and Snell label allows these racers to race at the highest national and international events. As users and educators, I want to just emphasize a few things here. That Snell recommend 5-year replacement recommendation based on use and wear and tear, and also based on our updates, because every update does sometimes really increase the performance criteria over time, especially. So always fasten the chin strap, and the chin strap should be tight enough that only allows like 2 fingers to go under once it's buckled. Not like the whole hand come in here, and not like 2 fingers like this, okay? Should be really just 2 very thin sliding in. And when you open up your jaw really big, you should feel the strap cutting in. If you can't feel the strap under your chin, open your jaw really big, it's too loose. My joke was, you're not supposed to happily eat a double cheeseburger with your helmet strapped on. That means it's too loose. The reason is once it's too loose, then the helmet can shift out of position very easily. Like I showed you earlier on that test to rotate the helmet and see how far it's going to roll off the dummy head. And only clean your helmet with soap and water. No other chemicals and solvents should be used on the outside or inside of the helmet. You never know how it's going to age or deteriorate the foam or the shell. And don't cut or do anything to the liner of the helmet. I went to a few rest places on those popular rider trail on near San Francisco here, like the Skyline. One time, this guy was like, hey, take a look at my helmet here. And I looked inside. You know, they usually paint the inside of the helmet black. So somehow it just looked like pepper, like a popcorn in there, and got all the white color showing quite a bit exposed in the forehead. I said, what happened here? Oh, he said it was a hand-me-down, so it was a little tight in the front, so I hammered it in. That's just so out of the blue. Like, I never imagined anybody would do that, because these foam in there, its job is to crush up during impact. If you already impacted and pounded in, you're really diminishing the helmet's capability to do its job. So because of that, I would remind you, do not use your mirror or your handlebar as a headrest to put your helmet on, because you do that hundreds of times. Over time, the weight of the helmet itself make it ding every time you put your helmet on there, same spot in the same general area. And those foam get crushed in at least over time 1 to 2 millimeters. And that is not good. So always put your helmet like on a seat or hang it on the chin bar, on chin strap, hanging like a basket up, not rested on a hard surface. Some police officers just kind of put their helmet on the baton. Do they call it baton? I was like, the performance, like their stick, that they carry around. They just rest their helmets on there. And that's not a good idea at all. So never put the helmet near a muffler or engine where it's hot, because the foam inside would get totally as hard as rock, melted. You don't even know. We have seen helmet that melted almost all the way through, and they won't do anything. It's just like you're wearing a German soldier hat. So for these reasons, only maybe people who have kind of like dissected the helmet like us, because we sometimes get helmets people send in, we would take apart the helmet and see what the inside looked like over use or after crash. And this is what we sometimes see. So the last word is, riders need an indication to tell them, the protective capability, because when you're shopping in the store, there's nothing that can really tell you.
Please, can you turn that light back on, please? My face is like dark.
So the protect capability cannot be told. Like, we cannot tell what by a look or handling the helmet in our hand, really tell whether this helmet is going to do better than another helmet, and or whether this helmet was bulkier, so it has more foam. No, the density of the helmet has to be like Goldilocks. It cannot be just too thick but too soft, because it crashes too soon. We need the maximum like 6 to 7 milliseconds before the crash is over, that there's still crush zone left. Otherwise, the helmet just bottoms out. I was thinking about, like, if you have been on a trampoline, if the trampoline is set for some kid to jump up and down, and you have enough clearance under there, kids are having a good time. Yeah, try to put somebody who's 160 pounds on there and jump. They're going to break their ankle, because there is not enough clearance for that setup. And same thing goes for these helmets. So that said, even the best helmet, that is the Snell helmet, we have the highest impact energy input and the lowest threshold for allowed criteria, G-force. So it is the most stringent motorcycle helmet standard there is in the internationally in the world. But even that is not enough to cover all the foreseeable possible crash impact energy level. We can only say, you know, we still enjoy the sport. We enjoy the outdoors, especially in this COVID-19 time. We need to get out to be healthy, but we can do it with the best safety equipment and buckle on correctly and do it safer. And that's all I have to share today.
Thank you very much, Hong. Can I see a
it's-
round of applause?
I just want you to know that I have time to answer your questions. If you like to ask questions, I'll be glad to spend more time here as long as you have the time.
Thank you very much. I've been watching some of the questions that have come across the chat during your presentation, and I've written a few of them down there. Everybody has a different view or take on what we talk about as far as a 5-year rule. What kind of sets up that 5-year rule? Can you go into a little bit more depth about that?
Yes. The 5-year rule is really not a hard rule for users. It's for us to recommend, because that's how most common riders, like we imagine regular riders, people who ride like commuters, okay, who rides 15, 20 minutes in and out, you know, or ride a few hours on the weekend, you know, because the wear and tear basically is what we are concerned. It's not the shell or the liner's natural expiration date or deterioration nature, okay? Because fiberglass and those foam do not biodegrade. It is the wear and tear. Basically, you see those the pads that's inside the helmet, they get really thin when you use it that often, right? Almost every day or every weekend. And that really literally make that helmet one size too big. And as I mentioned earlier, fitting is about the most important thing you as a rider can do to increase your own personal protection. Because we test them on the best fitting dummy that we find in a series of dummies. And everybody's head is not like our dummy. We have a standard dummy, right? And your head shape, like how wide it is, like my Asian head is more round, and more Caucasian descendant people have more oval shape because their forehead is more narrow. So the measurement distance from the front to the back will be longer than the round head people, even if they have the same circumference. So what happens is people tend to buy helmet that's one size too big for them. And by the time they use it 5 years later, the helmet might be 2 sizes too big. Okay, so
Wonderful.
that is more of the concern. If you hardly ride or you have several helmets and you don't wear the same helmet all the time over a long time and don't wear out those pads and the helmet feels very snug and like half new, you don't have to run out to buy a helmet because it's just 5 years old. Okay, you can extend the use of that helmet at least for a year or two, depending on the condition.
So is everything we do, being rider coaches, you know, we sometimes search for a definite answer, but the context and the environment of how things are used really dictate how long we should keep our helmet. And we all kind of know when it's time to get a new one. And we all kind of know what is the best recommendations. 5 years is a nice rule of thumb, but it's not necessarily written in stone.
Exactly. We recommend officers, for instance, we write letters of recommendation to the the people in charge of these officers and say, you know, they ride so long in a day, taking it off and on so many times during the day. The 5-year recommendation should not be their strict guideline. They need to allow their officers to replace the helmet more often.
So 2 other questions kind of sit with me that I think they may be helpful for everybody. There is a lot of talk about MIPS helmets. What is your take on the new direction of the MIP system with helmets?
Well, we happen to have tested some bicycle helmet with and without MIP system. And those bicycle helmets are identical, made by the same manufacturer. Some have MIP system installed and some do not. And we tested it with the purpose to really to see how much these helmet that has MIP system moves or not move relative to the helmet that does not have the MIP system, because the MIP system's claim is that it will enable the helmet to shift on the head more along with the angular impact. Therefore, it is good to the brain and good for preventing rotational impact related potential head injury. What I want you to understand is that right now, even though we have tested with those rotational dummies and measurements, we have not published those yet because we haven't tested enough sample, but we tested enough we can tell that they don't make a difference. What happened is the dummy we tested, we actually tried to use like swimming cap to make the helmet dummy and the MIP system to kind of catch a little bit more rather than the plastic, like the metal dummy that's too slippery. You know, we try to create a little bit like bandanas and stuff, you know, try to make it, and still we don't see any difference that's statistically really significant. What that means is that we then looked at and talked with the MIPS people, like how do you get this information that the MIP system really moves or enable the helmet to move independently more so than what we see. And what we found out is that they really use some kind of very sticky silicone to really kind of grab the plastic. You know what the MIP system look like, right? It's like a thin plastic that moves inside the helmet so that it grabs, it is the surface that the head skull really make contact first. So their claim is that if you impact as like a off blow, then it will move more and your head will not move as much. But what we have found out is nobody's head is like so sticky. I mean, the sticky scalp like those that they are testing it on. So basically they glue kind of semi with this dummy and the movable part. So of course that's going to be relatively staying with the dummy, so the helmet will move more. But the reality is nobody's normal hair, or even the guy who's baldy, you know, just the clear skin, is going to act like those gooey silicone cap that they put on their dummy to create such kind of a test results. So we are pretty convinced that those MIP system really in a like a normal head will just move as much as without it. And it kind of makes sense too. Like what the common problem we have in the real world, like I'm just talking, like you motorcyclists, you should really find a helmet that fits you so well and so snug. It's hard to do. Okay, you can even with a very good one, unless you have it custom made, you know, there's some gaps there. So we don't really believe the MIP system is going to do what it claims to do, which is will move more independently than those that, you know, on head than those without. That's for one thing. But there's another thing I want to emphasize here. Scientifically, we do not know at all how this much or that much moment and angularly would create brain injury. The threshold, like, okay, you slap somebody hard enough on the hand, at some point you're gonna bruise, right? And we can do a pretty good experiment, or the medical doctors already know at some kind of impact level you're going to have bruises. Or like in our testing, we know people will die if they subject to 400 to 600 peak G, okay? And at what level you're going to have a skull fracture. We know all that. And that is what we have set our testing standard and criteria for. Snell standard traditionally always set at 300 and crash at 7.75 meters per second. And we have reduced over the last 15, 20 years to 275 peak G, whereas the DOT standard from 1974 has stayed at 400 G. That was, why do they set at 400 G then in 1974? Because that was understood as a medical fact that most people will sustain severe brain injury or fatality after that number. So at this point, nobody really knew at what kind of an angular acceleration, say 50 G, 100 G, that's going to create a situation that people are going to sustain concussion. Nobody knows. So how do you really evaluate anything when you don't even know at what point it's going to lead to injury? So we need two things. One, we have to have a threshold. We have to have a better medical understanding what kind of impact at what level is going to lead to what kind of injury. So if we are going to be worried about concussion, which is a serious concern for football players, or maybe to some dirt bikers who goes around these tracks all the time at a low speed, that they come off the bike a lot and get back on and do it again. But for most street rider people or people who don't do those dirt bike competition all the time, repeated low impact is really not a major concern. I mean, if you crash, you're done for the day. And for the, you know, for concussion to have long-term serious results and health consequence, it's repeated concussion. Right now, medical people tell if you know or you suspect you have had a concussion, you should not get on the football field or don't ride your motorcycle again in 2 days or 2 weeks, right? But we don't even know what kind of level or impact type would result in motorcyclist concussion. So right now, all the testing standard and criteria we do at Snell set up is basically using severe brain injury or fatality numbers, not really shooting for concussions, because there is a cutoff here. Concussions are caused by lower level. But when you cushion the helmet and not have, say, 50 or 100 peak G level impact, then the helmet has to be a lot softer, the liner. It should be like a feather pillow, so you don't get that kind of low impacted peak G. But you only have this much room. So by making the helmet really soft and can cushion you in a gentle drop, not getting like a over 100 peak G, guess what? The helmet is going to bottom up when you crash a little bit severe. That is the trace that I showed you earlier when the helmet bottoms up with the DOT level of soft cushion, soft liner. So do we worry about more serious long-term injury and fatality? Or do we worry about concussion that motorcyclists at least could easily recover and not really worry too much?
Thank you. I really appreciate the information you've given us tonight. And although I would love to open this up, I can see us going probably till midnight with the questions that I'm seeing crossing. I think you gave us a splendid view overall of what Snell certification and Snell standards can do for our helmets, and probably a better view of what we were thinking before on how long to keep our helmets and what it really means to have something that's going to protect our brains in a crash. So if you all would please, another round of applause for Hong before
Thank
we
you.
take off.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My pleasure.
Um,
Anytime, if you have any other questions in the field and your student asks anything you feel uncomfortable or not knowing enough to answer, please have them call us. We always have people, a human being, answer our phone. No recordings here.
Be
Every
careful.
call is important.
We do this every week. You never know. We may be bugging you a lot.
Okay. Thank you
Oh.
again. Sorry for the late.
No, it's our pleasure to have you here. It was
Yeah, this
was
COVID
awesome.
time, my parents are older, seniors, 80s, and when I hear a heart medication is running out today, I gotta go to the pharmacy before they close. So I can go there now and give it to them.
Very understandable. We appreciate you taking this time out, even though you had more pressing things to do.
Okay, anytime, my pleasure.
I'll be emailing you, and I think we'll probably post this on the website so other people can gain from it as well, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, not at all. And welcome to the videos and the website that we have. Use it anywhere you think is appropriate and could advance your effort in preventing injury. That's what we are here for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is awesome.
Yeah, if you know anybody, any other organizations or their class could use my help, I'll be glad to be part of your group.
Oh, we'll be sharing your name everywhere. Don't worry.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody, can you see the shared slide? Did it come up? All right. As always, I got to, kind of market this a little bit. If you've seen tonight, we had about 40 people in here, and that's just wonderful. Even though we started late and went a little late, I appreciate the fact that you've stayed around and learned a little bit from Hong and the information that was put out. Please invite others to participate, because we're only as good as the people we talk with and bring into this. And once again, the whole reason we do it is to share information, communicate better, and improve the tribe. Please, if you're not mentoring somebody, mentor somebody. And if you feel like you need mentored, find somebody that has knowledge that you don't have, and you can both share and mentor each other. Be a mentor and be mentored. wrap up from today. We didn't do the weekly poll. We kind of did that up front, but I think our questions and thoughts were well answered by the presentation. The next Tribe Talk will be Sunday, February 26, 2021. And as always, you're welcome to join us on Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Eastern at Tribe Talk Happy Hour. Thank you all. Really appreciate the fact you showed up here tonight and you stuck it out. Now go watch the rest of the football game. I love you. Don't take that the wrong way. We'll see you Wednesday.
Night.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.